I'm actually on the other side of this wall. We're about to get ready for the Third Coast Trombone Retreat outside. I'm here in Western Michigan, and so there's a whole bunch of live streaming uh, equipment. So it's been fun, a little hair raising because trying to keep socially distanced is tough, but uh, just being a good human being and trying to be a good friend to my people over the internet is learning a new skill. So thank you for asking.
Well, and it's, we're going to talk more about some of these projects because you have been doing some really special uses of technology, both in terms of multi-tracked video of yourself, of a really interesting trombone etude project that we'll talk more about. But I wanted to start with your own journey. I work with a lot of young brass players, and there's always that question when you're a teenager of how do I get from here to there? Here's this guy who sat principal trombone in the San Antonio Symphony, plays principal trombone in the New York City Ballet Orchestra. Everybody knows this guy can play. How did he get here? How did you go on this journey from a kid in high school playing the trombone to becoming one of America's best orchestral brass players? What happened?
You're too kind. I won't say that I wasn't lucky. I certainly have had my share of luck. But I do think that there's a lot of hard work in there too. I'm originally from upstate New York, Poughkeepsie area, the Hudson Valley region, which is, I think, the most beautiful, especially in the autumn with all the leaves changing and such. But I had proximity to New York City. It's about an hour and a half. And so, of course, being back in New York is kind of a homecoming for me. But there's a bunch of fantastic players up there, especially my teacher through middle school and high school, Paul Bellino, who actually spent a lot of time in Texas at the Texas Music Festival, I think it's called. But so growing up in upstate New York, I sorry, I just started in middle school band. I guess it was fifth grade, so I guess that's elementary school. My dad was a voice teacher, so I did sort of have that intro to music early on, but I didn't really study with him at all. He just kind of made me sing in his choirs and such, and I think I sang mass at the church that he played organ at. For a couple of years, I would just sing in the choir and maybe have a solo once in a while, but no real professional training through him. You know how hard it is to work with family sometimes. But I've always loved singing, and so when it came to be picking an instrument, I said, well, of course, I want to play the saxophone because it's the coolest instrument on earth. And by the time they got to Santero, they didn't have any more saxophones. They were all taken. And so I said, well, how about the clarinet? That's kind of like a saxophone, right? And I know everyone's going to be like, boo, hiss, you can't say it's the same. Blah, blah. I didn't know anything. I was 10. And of course, that one was taken too. But my older brother, he was he was a trombonist at the time. He hadn't switched to bass trombone yet. 5 years my elder. He had just gotten a new trombone, and so his old student trombone was kind of just collecting dust. My mom said, Brian, why don't you try this thing? Why don't you try this slidey bit? And so I tried it out, and I was hooked. Hook, line, and sinker. And so I was fortunate to have started studying with a teacher pretty early on, Paul Bellino, I mentioned before, but also my fifth grade teacher, just my regular homeroom social studies, that guy, he was a trombonist as well. So this is, I think, where luck came in for me, and I had a pretty good solid start. Um, but I don't think it's the only way. It's just the way it happened for me. Um, and so through that, through my studies with Mr. Chismore, Mr. Donald Chismore, love that guy, and Paul Bellino, I eventually got through middle school, jazz band, did the jazz band thing, high school, I got into the wind ensemble, and uh, oh, I'm trying to force myself not to go down too many tangents. I apologize. Uh, and high school, I think I had, oh, ninth grade, my first youth orchestra. And I remember playing bass trombone on Ruslan and Ludmilla. Just the most fun. Boom, 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 dun, dun, dun. And I guess the bass trombone part isn't that fun, but uh, it's not the pyrotechnics of the violins and such. But just being in this new ensemble of just like instruments that I'd never played with before, cellos and basses and like bassoons. What are bassoons? I've never seen a bassoon before. Um, and it was just the most exhilarating thing, just to be playing with a whole new orchestra and hearing that orchestra that I had grown up listening to CDs of Tchaikovsky and Brahms of, and just being inside that orchestra was one of those, wow, this is it. This is what I want to do. I don't know if that answers your question.
No, that's great, man. That's it. So the Ruslan and Ludmilla overture kind of lit that fire for you, and being in the middle of an orchestral sound. And that actually points to something that I think is a really interesting part of the journey for young brass players, which is when you said maybe the bass trombone part isn't the most exciting part. Um, what was your journey with that in high school, and maybe even beyond, maybe even at work today?
Sure.
Sometimes in ballet music, your trombone parts may not be as active as some of the other things that are going on. So what has been your journey with the varying roles of the trombone in orchestral repertoire, if that makes sense? I mean, are you ever bored? Were you bored sometimes when you were younger? Or how do you view that role? Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think that makes sense. The board is a, if I were to say bored, I would say no. Was I disappointed with my part? Maybe a little bit. Um, but I had the best seat in the house for listening to an orchestra. As a trombonist, like you go three movements in Brahms 4 before you come in. And you get to listen to like the most beautiful pieces, the most beautiful pieces in the repertoire of people playing, and you just get to experience it. So no, my wife, who's an oboist, would always comment, Brian, you are just always making sounds. And I think that kind of has to do with like just sitting in my chair and just waiting to happen. And I would sing that part in my head, or I might start just kind of tapping on. I probably drove everyone nuts, but no one ever told me anything. But just like living the music, like really feeling any sound, and just like I'll copy bird songs. I'll I'll make I'll make harmonies with the vacuum cleaner. I think just being in love with sound and such has been the thing that drove me not to trombone, but through trombone. Like really, like finding like what sounds can this instrument do? What can it, like how low can I go? How high can I go? How loud? Asking all those questions, but also wondering like, can I play what the violins can play? And not just being stuck in my part, but also like learning the scores, so to speak. Not in the traditional sense of like opening up a scores as you would, because I can't transpose on site. I wish I could do that. Um, not okay. I try, but not successfully. But when it comes to the role of the trombone in the orchestra, to answer your question, um, I think we've always been a very supportive instrument. We rarely get the solos. I'm lucky in the ballet orchestra being the principal trombone. If there are new pieces that we play, generally I'll get the solos. But also, as you might hear, there's a bass trombone playing uh, in this house. My colleague, Nick Schwartz, shout out to Nick Schwartz, bass trombone of the New York City Ballet Orchestra. He he gets a ton of solos from like Swan Lake and Nutcracker, a bunch of these solos. Tchaikovsky loved bass trombone, at least I assume, because he wrote all the tricky stuff for us for the tenor trombones, but all the fun stuff for the bass trombone. And so it's been really fun discovering the ballet repertoire because trombones, I think, are in Russian music, especially Stravinsky, Prokofiev, Tchaikovsky. These were the heavy hitters. These are the composers we talk about when we're talking about excerpts and like, hey, let's brass forward to 423 in the second movement of Swan, whatever, and you get these awesome trombone lines that you don't normally get in foray.
Right. Well, so we had a great question from a student, and we had a YOSA student who asked, people sometimes puff their cheeks when they play brass instruments, even though you're not supposed to. So what advice would you give to young musicians that tend to puff their cheeks when they're playing a brass instrument?
Tend to puff their cheeks. This is usually, I'm sorry for the technical question, but I love technical questions. Having a good tangent. Having a good foundation is what you need in order to have the springboard to make your music off of. So when brass playing, puffing cheeks generally means that you're not focusing your tension. Tension with an asterisk. Tension in this point can be good. Think of tension as in sitting up straight with good posture and such. You want to be relaxed, but your bones support your bones and muscles support your body just enough to hold you up straight. So if you have a good amount of tension in the corners, we often talk about corners in brass playing, in the embouchure. That's if you don't have good firmness in these sort of areas. Unfortunately, my mustache is covering up my corners, so you can't really see it that well. But if I'm firming up my corners, you'll see that it's really hard for me to puff my cheeks. But if I loosen up, it just kind of balloons out. But if I put my fingers on my corners and kind of make that funny face, it doesn't want to puff anymore. It just comes out the mouth. So give that a shot. One quick tip. Try, I don't think I have a pencil near me. Try holding a pencil in between there with your corners activated and see how level you can keep your pencil. That's a good way to test that.
Nice. Well, so you and I both share an alma mater. We both did our undergraduate studies at the Curtis Institute of Music in Philadelphia. And I'm curious if you can talk. I'm curious if you can talk about your journey to Curtis. How did you hear about Curtis? And then what did Curtis mean in your training and education? both as a trombonist and more generally as an artist, if that makes sense.
Okay. Let's see. I didn't really know what Curtis was until maybe my senior year of high school. No, junior year, because I auditioned, so I had enough time to apply. Um, Probably late junior year. Um, so actually, a funny uh, serendipitous, I don't know, coincidence, I guess. So I did this New York State Summer School of the Arts, NISA, in Saratoga Springs,
Mm-hmm.
which is the summer home of the Philadelphia Orchestra. And of course, being in Philly, a whole slew of Philadelphia orchestra teachers teach at Curtis. And so naturally, getting to work with a lot of those orchestra members, um, you hear rumblings of like, well, so such and such teaches at Temple University, and they teach at Curtis, and there's some, and you're like, Curtis, what's that? That's interesting. And of course, I had heard of Nitsan before. He was one of the draws for me to do that NISA program. Um, and I then found out that, well, he of course teaches at Curtis. And so I said, well, he's one of the best musicians I've ever heard play the trombone. So I think I want to study with him. And I didn't get in the first time, which was okay. They made up for it later. uh, and the it was okay because there were excellent. It probably wound up better because I wasn't ready for college at that point. Um, my senior year of high school, I was studying with Jim Markey and at Juilliard Pre-College. And I had a whole lot of fundamental things. I was very lucky to work with Jim, with Mr. Markey, amazing musician. For those who don't know, now bass trombonist of the Boston Symphony, used to be uh, trombonist and then bass trombonist of the New York Phil. Um, such an underachiever. And so he was amazing with technique and such, and just had a whole lot of things rattling on in my brain of just like, well, what do corners mean, and how do I articulate, and what's actual rhythm and subdivide and everything. And so by the time I started out at New England Conservatory. I did 1 year there. Um, I just still hadn't figured out a whole lot of things, and um, I needed I needed a little time off just to like kind of get myself straight and set myself straight. And I took a year off, or I transferred to my mother's basement university, and probably played a few more video games than I should have. But I was lucky to also be doing New York Youth Symphony. So another youth symphony. Youth Symphony is the best thing. I love it. Um, and played a whole bunch of music, and I was playing with the New York Youth Jazz Ensemble. I was playing bass trombone there. And at that point, I said, no, like if I'm going to get into the school that I want to get to, I need to make it happen. I need to practice. And so that's when I sort of started to figure out my practice routine, and like what's a warm up, what are the exercises, what are fundamentals that I need to be working on a pardon me on a daily basis, working on excerpts and such. And so uh, by the time February came around, yeah, funny story. I'm just full of them. I'm sorry. You'll have to cut me off, but you'll tell us.
No, no, no. This is good.
Stay on track. And so we had this one New York Youth Symphony concert actually at Carnegie Hall, the night before my Curtis audition. And it had like a pretty difficult like first trombone part. Like not maybe it was just like really thick orchestral texture sort of thing. So it wasn't like here's a trombone solo sort of thing. It wasn't that difficult, but it was just like really choppy, a lot of high stuff. And so
Stuff
I
that you
was
felt in your face the next morning.
unfortunately did. And so the next day, went to my audition and played a pretty good solo. Uh, Got through my tuba mima excerpt and such, and then he was like, "Let's." Nitsan was there, of course, and he said, "How about let's hear Rhenish, Schumann's Third Symphony." And so in that fourth movement, the alto trombone doubling the horn, plays a high E flat, which is I think the second highest note in the repertoire for trombone, other than Beethoven 5, the infamous Beethoven 5 part for alto trombone. If you don't know what I'm talking about, trombonists, go look at Beethoven 5. It's got a high note, two of them. Don't miss them. And and Nitsan was just like, "Are you okay? Like, you seem to be having trouble with this. Like, you don't strike me as the type who is at high range." Because I would get through it and I would just jackhammer, and I was honest with him. I said, I don't mean to make excuses, but I had a really tough contemporary program last night, and I don't think I managed my practice well for this. Can I try it again? And I did a little better the second time. But he took me anyways, which I thank him deeply. Because Curtis was, of course, a mixed bag. Everything's a mixed bag, right? But it was amazing. It's an amazing place to be, just surrounded by amazing musicians, more people who have perfect pitch than I can count with my hands. I can only count to four. You count to four, you have to start over. Being a musician, of course. And there's just so many amazing musicians there that if you're not going into someone's room and just, hey, play a duet with me. If you're not doing that, like, you're doing something wrong. Like, you should just be like trying to play with as many people as often as possible, like just making music. And that was the most amazing thing at Curtis, and this was seriously like so commonplace. One of the other trombonists would knock on my door and say, "Hey, Brian, Rhenish me." And of course, like, we both had both first and second trombone parts memorized, and I would play one of the parts, he would play the other, and then we'd switch. And you constantly practice these excerpts, just like listening in a new room, seeing what a different acoustic made it feel like, and it's just like you go through this scientific method like no other place in that kind of situation. So it was really the best place to practice because you were just practicing with amazing musicians.
Well, I think that points to one of the real important elements of college level music making for everybody, which is there's so much value just in taking advantage of your peers and colleagues. You're no matter where you're going to school, find the other musicians who are as serious as you are. Maybe more importantly, find the other musicians who are more serious than you are and learn from them and with them. Playing chamber music. It's, for me as a student composer, one of the best pieces of advice I ever got, even when I was in high school, was don't write an orchestra piece for some imagined group. Write a duet or a trio or a quartet for your friends. Work with the people who are next to you. And that, of course, is also where you met your fabulous wife. So that advice paid off in non-musical ways as well, I guess. So, Brian, go ahead.
No, quite literally in dividends.
There you go. So we have another question from YOSA musician David Escamilla, who asked, "What's your favorite piece that you have ever played?" You think of all of the repertoire. What is the thing that most? I mean, every trombonist loves Schumann Rhenish Symphony, of course. But if you had to think of all the things you've ever performed, which one is just the most treasured and cherished piece of music? And I know that's not a fair question, but pick one anyway.
All of them.
I love all my children equally.
Sorry. Yeah. My favorite piece of music that I've played. Okay. Interesting. I'd say, depending on the weather, it could either be. I'm sorry. I kind of have to pick two on this one.
That's cool.
Mozart Requiem. And it's not first because of the very important distinction that he didn't actually finish it, of course. So it's not entirely his piece. It would be really interesting to see like what the Benedictus and all that would have been in Mozart's actual language. Hope I'm not misquoting that. So Mozart Requiem and Mahler 2.
Oh, I got to hear you play Mahler 2.
That's right, at Tobin. Oh, that first. Oh, that is such a heart not wrenching. I don't know if enriching. It's such a so emotional and just such a brilliant piece that it's just having like. Seriously, like being a trombonist, best seats in the house. When you've got the choir literally like within spitting distance, not socially distancing then, unfortunately. But when they're like literally, I could reach back and touch them, and they are just oh gosh, most amazing feeling. Mahler 2. That's, and I guess choral, and I don't know if that's like the singer. The inner singer in me that wants to get out. Yeah.
Well, there's also this historical relationship between the trombone section and singers, right? That the trombone's earliest role was doubling vocal parts and reinforcing and enriching the sound of the chorus. And it's a really human connection. You breathe the way they do. You phrase the way they do. There are huge differences in technique, and of course, there are huge differences in what you do in the 18th century, in the 19th century. But you go back to the birth of the trombone in Monteverdi and all of this early Baroque stuff. I mean, it's a powerful connection with the sackbuts and the singers. So it's primal, man. It's in your blood.
It's in my blood. I just I'm just one with the universe, I guess.
Yes, and you have a lovely singing voice yourself.
Well, thank you.
Yeah, you're quite an educator. You're on a couple of different university faculties, but you're also involved in a project that I want to make sure people know about. This in the course of the last several months, when so many of us have been pursuing projects, finding ways to do work we might not have had time for before. You've been working with this amazing project called the Trombone Exercise Library Project. And I know that Elon Morgenstern, the former bass trombonist of the San Antonio Symphony, who now plays in Vancouver, British Columbia, is a big part of this as well. Can you tell us a little bit about this project? And a few months ago, I was constantly seeing these very cool Facebook videos of live performances and all kinds of fun, wacky stuff with this. So what is this project?
This project is it's kind of the crossroads of my desire to do something tech related. One of my first jobs out of Curtis was I was an AV tech. I would record friends. I would man cameras and multi-camera shoots and such. And so I got like a real I got a real good taste of like, oh, what's a $30,000 camera capable of? And so naturally, once you get that taste, you start liking tech a little bit. I always liked tech before that, but it really drove it home. And so when the lockdown, not lockdown, but I keep calling it lockdown. When I kind of, me and my wife, when we went into quarantine, so self quarantine, we did an entire month in our New York City apartment, not leaving. We literally did not leave for, I think, 2 weeks at one point, and stepped outside once for 5 minutes after that. And so I felt like I had to do something tech related because if it were just trombone, I would drive myself nuts. Because there are only so many long tones and arpeggios that you can play in a day before you say, you know what, I think I need to learn Dorian or something and do something weird. Not that modes are weird, but you know what I mean. And so I saw some people doing some like live warm up sessions on Facebook, and I was just like, huh, I could do that. I could even show the music that I'm going to play. I want to show the music that I'm going to play, and hopefully people will play with me. If not, I get to practice and I get to say I did it on camera. And I'll feel like I'm feeding not just my chops, but also my soul, doing things that I love. And so I asked Elon and I said, hey, I know that you've kind of been writing some exercises and doing stuff. Like, I need a partner in crime for this. Would you like to do it? And he said, of course. And so we started doing some TELP, Trombone Exercise Library Project, because Trombone Exercise Library Project is a little long. So I just call it TELP. And I do some TELP lives, and we release videos on like exercises that with not just exercises of the music, but most importantly, I should say, with backing tracks, like rhythm tracks, and harmonies, and sometimes drones, just stuff that, when they say practice your drones, practice your metronome, you're just like, I don't know what to do. And so like when it's built into an exercise, it makes it really easy. Like you just press play and you just play. And voila, you have all the things that every teacher has ever told you to do. And not saying that we're that good, but hopefully we're getting in that direction. And so over the past month or so, things have slowed down a little bit because we're aiming to start an app. But so we're kind of putting the brake on the videos, so to speak, so that we can put efforts into another tech project. But it's been a lot of fun, like learning how to like, what are MIDI instruments? Like, how do you orchestrate and then send that? How do you live stream? How do you like do that successfully? How do you be a persona and like entertain and like be true to yourself and still be educational? So you learn a lot about yourself doing a new project like that.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and I would encourage any trombonist, tenor trombone, bass trombone, these exercises are super useful, and just the material itself is really cool. But then there's also this element. So if you go to the TELP Facebook page, you can check out some of the past stuff that's gone on there. And there's another project of yours that I wanted to mention. We just, at YOSA, through our social media, we just shared your quartet video recording of the Victoria O Magnum Mysterium.
Oh, thank you.
Incredibly gorgeous trombone quartet transcription of a choral work. But with, on the one hand, breathtakingly gorgeous musicianship, and at the same time, a dry sense of humor and a wackiness to the video. and a very impressive technical wherewithal in terms of the whole thing of multiple Brian Santeros that will haunt your dreams. Trust me. So can you just talk about that? Because I view in that two different things. I see you're a real consummate, refined musicianship where the performance itself is beautiful. It's just absolutely top-notch playing, and you're not compromising one iota on crafting the most gorgeous imaginable version of this music. And at the same time, you're being a goofball, and you're doing it in this high-tech and visually engaging way. You mentioned being yourself, and I guess what I see there is you kind of being yourself, somebody who's a really refined artist and not afraid to be a little silly. But what's that journey like for you? And saying, you know, how did you get to that? To putting the video together, and whether it's talking about the technical process or just kind of your aesthetic. I'm just curious to learn more, and I would encourage everybody to seek out this video because it's really something.
Well, thank you. There were many hours put into that. I have a very similar one coming out, which I want to put smart sheet music in with it so you can play along, sort of thing. So stay tuned to that. Check out my YouTube channel. I think it's Tsunami Bone. Just
search Brian Santero.
Just search me,
and you'll find it. Yeah.
So I mentioned that I did a lot of video tech after Curtis, and then I quit that. I guess I quit that job when I got the San Antonio Symphony job, and that's when I really got to know you, Troy. Of course, still remember those burgers. Amazing. I can't remember the name of the place, but it was.
Yes, that was Fat Boy.
That's it.
Burgers and Dogs.
Oh, so good.
Yeah, and the best fried pickles in town.
The fried pickles. That's right. Oh, yeah. So good. Sorry.
Important.
And so those tech skills, desires, whatever, kind of lay dormant a little bit the couple of years in San Antonio because I didn't bring any of my equipment down. I didn't have my microphones or my mixer or anything. But honestly, everything that I did, you could easily do with just an iPhone and a microphone. You can't see it. I'm pointing to a microphone right now. This is a microphone. But you don't need much. You just need some ingenuity. And so what I started with, I took the motet that I wanted, which I knew that I wanted to do Victoria's O Magnum Mysterium. It was a piece that my high school chamber choir, we got to sing at the Vatican on our Europe tour, which was an amazing thing. There's a little blurb about Melissa Gleichenhaus, who's, may she rest in peace, and was an amazing educator and really inspired people. She was our choral director, and she introduced me to this piece. And I said, when quarantine happened, I need something beautiful. I know what that piece is. I'm going to play that piece. And so I set to task. I opened up MuseScore, which is a free notation software a la Finale or Sibelius. I'm pretty sure everyone knows about MuseScore at this point, but if you don't, go check it out. And I just basically input the whole thing into trombone readable clefs and whatever, and did my own. I think this is probably my third arrangement. I don't arrange much. Never had the. I felt like I couldn't, like I wasn't good enough, but I tried, and I think it turned out pretty well. And I exported a PDF and a whole bunch of audio files, and I took those audio files, I put them into a multi-track audio program. This one specifically was Reaper, but you could do it in Audacity, which is a free version, a free program, multi-track editor. and I just played along. I played with my friends who were MIDI 1, MIDI 2, and MIDI 3, and just laid down like what the bass trombone part should be. And then I did the alto trombone part, and then did all the parts. And eventually you get to a point and you're like, it doesn't add a tune. So you'd re-record a little bit. And so I did all the audio first. And I hate to give away the tricks of the trade, but this is why you tune in. All of that, everything that you will see is fake. I'm not playing. I'm kind of playing. Sometimes I'm playing, sometimes I'm not. Sometimes I was kind of chopped and was just like, I can't hold on to this note.
Right.
My
but
face
if you are
hurts.
playing, what we're hearing is not what you're playing. What we're hearing is the pre-recorded audio.
Is the pre-recorded audio, and I just played along. And so I did video takes of me playing along with the fully rendered multi-track.
Right.
And my wife at one point said, you should have like different characters. You should like you play these instruments differently. Like, why don't you be a different person? I was just like, well, yeah. I mean, I got red shirt and blue shirt. And wait a second. Huh. I have an idea. And I don't want to give it away before you have to watch it
Just
to
check
go
it
see
out.
it.
We'll put a link in the comments on this when later. We'll make sure there's a link for everybody to see it, or just go to YouTube, search Brian Santero, and then it's one of his recent videos. It's great. That O Magnum Mysterium, and it's again musically gorgeous, but also just a hoot and a half. It's a lot of fun.
Thank you. I do want to say one thing, and that's just like being an artist is not just about being in the practice room and getting things right. Like, of course, you have to practice a passage and like know what it takes in order to do it right. But in the heat of the moment, you just have to be yourself. You just have to say, I'm going to do, like the orchestra is getting really sharp. Like, I'm just going to play sharp too. Maybe not the best example, but you see what I mean. Like, you have to go with the flow sort of thing.
Yeah.
And that creative process a lot of the times was just like, I see it's going to be one thing, and then honestly, like, it takes a whole bunch of turns and becomes something else, because you just have to go with the flow and be creative and enjoy the process. It's not about the product, it's the process.
Right. Well, and live music is so much about responding to what you hear. And I think one of the things we struggle with in classical music versus other styles is that we are sometimes hesitant to respond to what we're hearing if it goes against what's on the page or what's on our digital tuner, or sometimes you just got to say, this is where the phrase is going tonight, and it's different than it was last night, and that's freeing and thrilling and sometimes scary.
Yeah, it's scary, but it's art.
Right, exactly. Yeah, that's why we go to hear live music. And we all look forward to the time soon, I hope, when we will get to do that again. Brian, I'm so grateful to you for taking the time to speak with us today about your own journey as an artist and about where you are right now. Good luck with all of these fascinating projects and with all the technology you're involved with. But know that there are people all over America who can't wait to hear you playing with the New York City Ballet again, too. And we look forward to that time.
Thank you so much, Troy. It's really a pleasure and an honor to get to speak with you again.
Yeah, absolutely, man. It's our pleasure. For everybody who's listening, YOSA Live Chats is a weekly series. Every Sunday afternoon, we have a different guest. And so we've got several great guests coming up throughout July, who I wanted to mention. Next Sunday, July 12th, we'll be joined by conductor Andre Raffel. On Sunday, July 19th, we'll be joined by Joshua Smith, the principal flutist of the Cleveland Orchestra. And then on Sunday, July 26th, we'll be joined by Angelica Negron, who's a composer and a member of the electronic indie band Balloon. She's the kind of person who rocks out in a club one night and also writes for the New York Philharmonic, and really varied artist. Three fascinating folks, just like Brian Santero is a fascinating guy. Brian, any closing thoughts for everybody as we say goodbye?
Stay creative. It's tough these days, I know, but call your friends. Just say, hey, you got any pieces you wanted to play? Renish me.
There you go. I love that. Thanks, Brian. It was great to have you with us. Thanks, everybody who viewed today, and we'll see you all again very soon.
Thanks so much, Troy.
Thank you.